Okay, perfect. Welcome everyone to the Know Your Body Cycle Tracking 101 workshop. Tonight we're going to take a look at the different phases of the menstrual cycle. We'll look at how to track cervical fluid, how to track temperature, how to track cervix changes, as well as confirming ovulation, and how to use a cycle tracking chart. We'll really dive into, I have screenshots here of the exact chart, and I'll show you how to fill in all the different spots on your chart. And I know some of you are savvy and skilled at charting. There's a few folks in our group tonight who've gone through a full round of coaching with me. 3 to 6 months, they've learned how to do it. There's other folks who've had a few sessions that are kind of dabbling, and there's folks that are totally new. So some of this will be a review for some folks. Some of it will be completely new. And even certain parts of it, like phases of the menstrual cycle, we're going to start to talk about vibes and kind of the seasons and shifts of the cycle. So that might be new for a lot of different folks here as well. Also, look at this cute confetti pad. Oh, gets me. So we'll start off first with talking about what is cycle tracking. So cycle tracking is the practice of tracking specific body symptoms like cervical fluid, basal body temperature, and cervix changes to know exactly where you are in your menstrual cycle. This is an important distinction because cycle tracking is not the same as period tracking. Period tracking is that thing we were taught by our moms, probably, or in health class, where we get our period and then we just count 28 to 30 days later and we guess when our next period's going to show up. That's just guessing about your period based on information from the past. Cycle tracking is using actual real-time information from your cycle to know exactly what's going on. So cycle tracking is so much more precise than period tracking. What we'll be talking about in tonight's call, the form of cycle tracking that I teach at Sauvage Wellness, is the sympto-thermal method. This method is a specialized form of cycle tracking that is one of the many forms of fertility awareness methods. There are lots of different fertility awareness methods, and they are used as natural birth control and for pregnancy support, and they all are based on observations of fertility signs. Some other examples of fertility awareness methods include the cervical fluid only method, often referred to as the Billings method or the ovulation method, the temperature only method, the what do they call it? FEM is one. It's a type of sympto-thermal method. There's lots of different ones. I teach the sympto-thermal double check method to be specific, and it's considered one of the most effective forms because there are more rules for this method. There are 4 rules, whereas lots of other methods only have 1 or 2 rules. That's when we're using it as natural birth control. But tonight we're really going to just talk about using the tracking tools to gain information about our cycles. And then if you choose to use it as natural birth control or to use it as pregnancy support, that's something different where we start to apply the rules on top of the cycle tracking method. So with the sympto-thermal method, you can do a lot of different things. With it, you can know which phase of the cycle you're in. You can know if and when you ovulate in a cycle. You can spot hormonal imbalance. You can optimize your fertility. And perhaps my favorite and often overlooked is you can optimize your libido, your energy, and your emotional needs throughout the cycle because you know exactly where you're at and what your hormones are doing. So now we're going to take a look at the different phases of the menstrual cycle. The first step to using the sympto-thermal method of cycle tracking is to understand how your menstrual cycle works and what exactly your natural rhythms are, which is a term that gets thrown around a lot. So the first phase is the menstrual phase. I'm going to say that again. The first phase is the menstrual phase. We've been taught our whole life that our period is the end of our cycle. It's not. The period is actually the start of a new cycle. So your menstrual phase is from day 1 to about day 7 of your cycle. Day 1 of each new cycle will always be the first day of your period. During the menstrual phase, the lining of the uterus is shedding. So it's not actually that you're shedding out this big egg that was released during ovulation. Quite often our egg just gets reabsorbed into our body. What we're doing with our period is shedding out a thickened lining of our uterus that grew to support implantation of the egg should fertilization had happened. During the menstrual phase, estrogen is low. It's the lowest it will be all cycle. And there is no progesterone production whatsoever. It's during this phase that the low estrogen actually triggers a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone or FSH. It stimulates FSH to produce so that it stimulates the growth of follicles in the ovaries. So follicle stimulating hormone references the stimulation of ovarian follicles, AKA eggs. So that's what's happening during this menstrual phase. The low level of estrogen triggers the production of FSH, which stimulates the growth of our ovarian follicles for the next upcoming round of ovulation that will take place in just a few weeks after the menstrual phase. Any questions so far? Okay, feel free to stop me because I talk about this all day long, so I might go quickly. Slow me down if you need me. So the vibe of the menstrual phase. This one tends to be the one we know the most about because it's the phase of our cycle we're most familiar with, because it tends to disrupt our life, though it doesn't need to. So the vibe of the menstrual phase is one where we have a bit lower energy than other phases of the month. We're craving alone time. We really like to hibernate, to release, and to restore during this time. The menstrual phase is the literal winter season of your cycle. And in winter, I don't know about you all, I'm in Vermont, it's cold as hell and there's snow everywhere, and I'm hibernating and I am restoring so that when spring comes, I can burst free like a new little butterfly. And that's what we're doing during our menstrual phase as well. If we're craving movement, it's slow and it's light unless we feel a burst or a craving towards more vigorous movement. And the foods tend to be hearty foods that we need or crave at this time. Things like stews and soups and root vegetables and nice red, vibrant foods like beets can be super nourishing during this time. And the menstrual phase is the perfect phase for self-reflection. It's this time when we're releasing and we're letting go, and it's the perfect time to look inward and to do some of that work for ourselves as well. Up next, we have the follicular phase. Now, this is confusing, so I'm going to break it down. The follicular phase doesn't necessarily happen after our period. It's happening at the same time. So the follicular phase is the phase of our cycle from day 1 to ovulation. And day 1 is the first day of our period. So the first week of the follicular phase is menstruation. It's that menstrual phase that we just talked about. And then from there, as our bleeding starts to wrap up, we move into kind of the heart of the follicular phase. There's like a week or so before we're in that full ovulatory phase and after we're in menstruation, where we're in this spring energy of our cycle. During this time, estrogen is rising due to the growing ovarian follicles. So how this works is we have our period and estrogen dips down low. That triggers follicle stimulating hormone to tell your ovaries to start maturing eggs. Those growing ovarian follicles make your estrogen. So while they're growing during the follicular phase, your estrogen is on the rise. Estrogen triggers the lining of your uterus to thicken. in preparation for implantation should pregnancy be accomplished in that cycle. So at this time, the uterine lining is growing right alongside those growing ovarian follicles. It's also during this time that we see cervical fluid being produced, because cervical fluid is stimulated by the production of estrogen. And one thing to note is that a late period, so not a missing period, but a late period, one that comes later than you expected, is always, without exception, due to a long follicular phase. It is always due to ovulating later than you normally would have. And that's because the phase from ovulation to the start of your period is unchanging. It is a set number of days, and it doesn't shift or change unless there's a hormonal imbalance at play. So when a period arrives late, what we're looking at is the body not getting to ovulation as soon as it normally would, and therefore having a longer follicular phase. The vibe of the follicular phase. This is the spring of our cycle. We're gaining energy, we're feeling active and energized, and we start to crave more of that type of movement. So maybe taking a couple runs, maybe doing some short burst cardio work, just increasing that energy. We tend to crave those light, fresh spring type foods. We're craving more social activity. We're ready to come out of hibernation. It's also the perfect time to start new projects because we're in this beginning phase of the cycle. We're ready to take stuff on. We're starting to gain that energy. And our libido starts increasing during this phase of our cycle, which is very biological. It's literally our body trying to get us prepared for, get us in the right place for pregnancy, for conception on a biological standpoint. But as modern humans, if we know this is the phase of the cycle we're in, even if we're not trying to get pregnant, we can utilize that to have a little bit more fun in our lives rather than feeling all the pressure to want to engage sexually in all the phases of our cycle. We can optimize the ones where we're most craving it. Cool. Up next, ovulation. I feel like everyone loves ovulation phase. So ovulation, the phase of it, the energy of ovulation is more than just a day or so, but the act of ovulation itself is a 24-hour event. The egg bursts out of the ovary and it lives for 12 to 24 hours. That's all she wrote. Ovulation itself happens 10 to 16 days before menstruation. So you'll notice here, very uncommon to what a lot of other people would have put on this slide or write in their books or what you hear at the doctor's office. I didn't put underneath ovulation that it's around day 14, because that's a big fat lie, and it's just not the case for many folks. For some of us, totally. For others, no. You can ovulate at any point in time in your cycle, and if you're having a cycle that's longer, if you ovulated later than normal, ovulation won't happen around day 14. It may happen later. For some folks, it happens earlier, like day 11 or 12. The important thing with ovulation is that once ovulation happens, your period arrives in a healthy cycle 10 to 16 days later. So that's how I like to use the definition of where it happens in our cycle. It's not dependent on the number, the day number, cycle day number. It's dependent on how far away from ovulation, how far away from menstruation this event took place. During ovulation, one egg is released per cycle. It can be released from either ovary, and it doesn't necessarily alternate month after month. You can go right side, right side, right side, left side, right side, left, left, left. It can be a little bit all over the place. Now, more than one egg, that is to say 2 eggs, can be released in the same cycle. It's quite rare. It always happens within the same 12 to 48 hours of the first egg being released. And It is the scenario that happens for fraternal twins, twins that don't look identical. With using the cycle tracking method as natural birth control, because we create a window of time for ovulation, we take this into account should there be that rare opportunity for 2 eggs to be released. What causes ovulation is a strong peak in estrogen that happens just a few days before ovulation itself. So it can be within 1 day, within 2 days, depends on the cycle, but estrogen rises rapidly until it peaks out like the top of a roller coaster. And then it starts to come back down quite dramatically. And then from there, that spike triggers luteinizing hormone, or LH, to rise up and have its own spike. And LH goes from 0 to 60. It goes from almost nothing to spiking. And it's that surge in LH that triggers the release of the egg from the ovary. Fun fact, anyone who's ever used or heard about OPKs, or ovulation predictor kits, they don't actually tell you that you're ovulating. They read LH surge. So that's why in some cycles you can get multiple positive ovulation reads, because if you're having multiple LH surges, but they're not quite getting to the peak for ovulation to happen, the ovulation strip will pick up those peaks even if they didn't lead to ovulation. So that's why OPKs are a great confirmation tool, but we want to be cycle tracking alongside it so we can confirm a surge with a temperature shift, which we'll get into in a moment, that tells us we've actually ovulated. Beautiful. So what's the vibe of ovulation? These photos are so funny in Canva. They just have like generic people running or laying around. So there wasn't a lot of body diversity. I really searched, but this is what we've got. So the vibe is lots of energy. We feel the most energized that we probably will feel in our whole cycle. And we crave active, energized movement. So ovulation time is the perfect time for things like cardio, for spin class, for going on a long run. It's also the time where vibrant foods tend to really light us up. So bright, colorful, vibrant foods. We feel very social, very outgoing. Great time to plan your parties and your major events. It's easier at this time for us to start to multitask because we have a greater capacity for it. We have the energy for it. And this tends to be the time in most people's cycle where we have our highest sex drive. And as you could guess, that's a biological function because our body's ovulating at that time, primally in hopes of us achieving pregnancy. But good to know because we can use that to our advantage in our relationships. This is also the time when we see the most production of cervical fluid, which is super helpful for lubrication during sex and intimacy as well. Okay, and then we've got one more phase. This is the phase everybody hates. But this is the phase I love to work on with folks because it's the one that we shouldn't have to hate. It should feel really cozy, really relaxing. The luteal phase is the phase of our cycle from ovulation to menstruation. This phase is ideally 10 to 16 days long. This is the only phase of the cycle where we make progesterone. We only make progesterone as a result of ovulation. So this means for folks who've been on a form of birth control that prevents them from ovulating, they're not making progesterone for that entire time they're on that form of birth control. And progesterone is amazing. It's very calming. It can be very relaxing, grounding. It helps with things like anxiety, with mood swings, with breast symptoms, with all that PMS stuff. If we have a lot of good hardy progesterone, we tend to have fewer premenstrual symptoms. The only exception to that is people who are hypersensitive to progesterone, and that manifests as PMDD, which is a severe form of PMS that is quite rare. In this phase, progesterone should be dominant. That is to say, it should be the dominant hormone. Estrogen should not. For folks that experience lots of premenstrual symptoms, it's likely that estrogen is dominating this phase of the cycle, and we want to switch that to progesterone. At the end of the luteal phase, progesterone declines, and this is what triggers the start of the period. So progesterone serves many functions, one of which is to hold your uterine lining in place. It holds it in place so that there's enough time for the fertilized egg to implant itself into the uterine lining should pregnancy be desired or be accomplished in a cycle. If the uterine lining is to let go too soon in a cycle, even if an egg and sperm meet and fertilization happens, if it's unable to implant itself into the thickened uterine lining, pregnancy will not occur. So this is why it's really important to have hearty levels of progesterone to hold that lining in place. The luteal phase is crucial, as we've been talking about, for pregnancy achievement and for the relief of PMS. This is the phase of the cycle that we really want to support if we're looking to boost, not fertility, if we're looking to boost natural support for pregnancy achievement and relief of PMS. And this seems like an actual picture of me on my luteal phase. It's not really, but this is pretty much what I do for a week. So what's the vibe? It's pretty much this: cat snuggles on a couch. So the vibe of the luteal phase is slowing down. This is the fall or the autumn of your cycle. And anyone who lives in the Northeast knows once fall kicks in, we all get real cozy. Suddenly we stop making as many plans. We find the nearest fire pit and we sit around with our hot beverages and we spend our days preparing for winter. And this is what this phase is all about, allowing ourselves to prepare for our periods, literally those period prep rituals. So we're slowing down. If we're moving our bodies, which we probably are, it's grounded movement, long walks, hikes in nature, some good juicy yoga flows on your mat. We're craving heartier foods at this time. So again, introducing more of those soups and stews and root veggies. We become less socially active as we start to slow down. It's not necessarily that we have less energy, we just have less desire to be energetic. And this is a time in our cycle where multitasking can feel overwhelming because we're trying to slow down. We're trying to really get grounded. And there's a tendency, rather than towards sexual intercourse, towards cuddles and snuggles and a different type of closeness at this time. All right, so before we dive into cervical fluid, I want to give you a second if anyone has any questions about the phases of the menstrual cycle, what our hormones are doing at those times, or the vibe of any of those phases. No questions? Oh, hi, Phoebe. You snuck in while we were going.
Hi, I did sneak in. Very clear presentation so far. Enjoying it.
Amazing. Honestly, you guys are getting this at a really good time because at this point, I've been teaching this information now in some capacity on a daily basis for about 2 years. So it's good to hear that it's coming over in a nice, succinct way. So what is cervical fluid? Cervical fluid is produced by the cervix under the influence of estrogen. Cervical fluid is crucial for pregnancy achievement and is made in preparation for ovulation. Cervical fluid allows sperm to get to the egg. Without cervical fluid, your vagina is too harsh for sperm to survive. It's literally a sperm killer. Without proper cervical fluid, sperm are like drivers in a new town without Google Maps. They have no idea where to go. They keep getting lost and they won't ask for directions. And eventually they literally break down and starve to death. And that's what happens to sperm without cervical fluid. They just get lost and suffocated in this new foreign environment, which I secretly love. by the way, that we have to tell them what to do. So cervical fluid moves through a common transition throughout our cycles. You may or may not see each of these different types in each of your cycles. This isn't cut and dry. It changes as we age. It changes with different aspects and influences on our lives. But generally speaking, how our transition looks is we start with menstrual bleeding, which is not cervical fluid. That's your uterine lining and other tissue coming out of your body. From there, we generally have a few days of a dry sensation. To be fair, your vagina is a moist, wet environment, so it's never going to feel completely dry, but it will feel like there's a lack of fluid compared to the other days of your cycle. So when you say go to the bathroom and you wipe, there's only like pee on the toilet paper, not watery discharge or a creamy sensation or a slippery sensation. Then from there, we transition into most likely a wet and watery sensation. And this sensation is most often felt when we're walking around. It's harder to see on toilet paper because it's clear, it's just like water almost. And that's because cervical fluid is mostly water. If you're noticing lower levels of cervical fluid, drink more water. It can literally boost up the production of your cervical fluid. This one we feel when we're walking around. I feel like we've all been there and no one's talked about it, but have you ever walked around through your life and felt like, I maybe just peed my pants a little bit? And then you went to the bathroom and you were like, I guess I didn't pee my pants. That is wet cervical fluid. It's super common when we're going through puberty and in high school and we don't know what's going on. That's that type of fluid. So we make that in the beginning phase of cervical fluid production. Then from there, it transitions. It starts to get smoother and thicker in consistency. It becomes creamy, almost like hand lotion, or milky, like literal milk being poured into a glass. And you could spread it around on your hand. We want to touch cervical fluid. We want to get the consistency of it. And then from there, it gets stretchy. You could literally start to pull it a little bit, like an inch or two between your fingers. And it's a little bit white or yellowy as you start to stretch it. That's an increased level of fertile cervical fluid. Then from there, we move into the peak or the most fertile type fluid, which is egg white and slippery. It literally looks like raw egg whites. Like you cracked an egg in a bowl and took the yolk out. You wouldn't have that much cervical fluid. Wow, you'd be a cervical fluid queen. But you would have some of that for a day or several days in your cycle, and you could stretch it quite far. This is not an exaggeration of how far you could stretch it. And I encourage you to pick it up and stretch it to see how stretchy it gets. It's not uncommon for that type of cervical fluid to have streaks in it of brown or red or pink getting mixed with either ovulation spotting, which is normal, or with oxidized blood that's coming out that was lingering from your last period just a few days ago. This is the peak type fluid. This happens most closely to ovulation, and it's the best type of fluid for sperm mobility. Then once we ovulate, cervical fluid drops right off because estrogen is no longer being produced. That egg that was making a lot of the estrogen broke free, and now it's not making the estrogen it was under the influence of follicle stimulating hormone. So estrogen drops off, and therefore your cervical fluid does as well. It might come back down this transition. You might get a creamy or stretchy day. You probably won't get a wet and watery day. What's most common is to return to either a dry sensation or this lesser fertile type fluid that's sticky. It's like tacky, crumbly, almost gummy-like. It's got like little, without being yeasty, it's got like little white crumbles in it. You can't really move it around too much. It breaks apart when you pick it up. That is the lesser fertile type fluid. And we make that under the influence of progesterone, because progesterone will thicken up that cervical fluid. And that type of thick cervical fluid is used to keep sperm out of the cervix, out of the uterus, now that you've already ovulated, now that your body's doing its job for the end part of the cycle where conception is not happening. Also, I love cervical fluid. It's my all-time favorite tracking sign. It is my jam. So these are so good as photos for cervical fluid. I don't even know how I got so lucky, but wet and watery kind of does feel like a splash of watery. And you won't have this much of the creamy, but like it kind of looks like that. If you've ever seen it, it's like legit kind of looks like that. It's that color and that smooth. It's amazing. So when you're tracking cervical fluid, you will keep track of 3 different things. The first is the sensation. Is it dry, moist, or wet? Sensation. That means walking around, living your life. What does it feel like down there? What's the appearance? This is what we just talked about. Sticky, watery, creamy, egg white, yellowy. You can get into the colors of it. And then we want to talk about quantity. How much fluid do you see or feel? And that's because a sign of increasing fertility, a sign of increasing into that ovulatory phase is having more cervical fluid. So often in the beginning of our cervical fluid production, there's a little bit less than there will be a few days later. It builds up. So we want to keep track of those 3 key parts. Am I moving too fast? Okay, beautiful. Peak day. This is amazing. Egg white cervical fluid, like this is actually what it looks like on my underpants and on my fingers. I love this. So the peak day, this is your last day of the most fertile type of cervical fluid present. That is often your last egg white fluid day. But if you don't have egg white fluid days, then it's going to be your last most fertile type day, which is likely creamy or stretchy. Now, this will change as we age. As we near the end of our 30s, cervical fluid begins to decrease. So we don't make as much of it, and sometimes we don't make all the different phases of it. And that will continue through our 40s as well and become much more apparent in our 40s when we start to move into the perimenopause phase. So don't get shocked as you age, or if you find yourself in that phase where cervical fluid is not as heavily produced as it once was for you. Now, that is to say, if you're used to having a good, healthy amount, a lot of cervical fluid, and you're not nearing the perimenopause phase of life, then we might want to work on boosting up your estrogen production to support all of that good, healthy cervical fluid. So the peak day will kind of shift for you over time based on where you're at in life and how your hormones are shifting through our different phases. Okay, we're to basal body temperature. So before I move on, questions about cervical fluid? No questions? I know a lot of you here are already tracking cervical fluid.
I have a question.
Hit me.
I think it was one of your other workshops, maybe like even a year ago. You had mentioned something about overproduction of cervical fluids. I'm not sure if it was something related to like histamines. Could you talk about me? Do you have time to talk about that?
I do.
Okay.
So overproduction of cervical fluid is a thing. It's real. It happens to me. So what's going on with cervical fluid is that we can make too little of it if we don't have enough estrogen, and we can make too much of it if we have too much estrogen. Now, too much of it for pregnancy achievement, not a bad thing. Too much of it for feeling good in your body, that's a little rough. Cervical fluid doesn't do anything to us if we have a whole lot of it, but it's telling us there's a lot of estrogen, which means we either got to be really good at detoxing out our estrogen, and most of us in our modern world just aren't, because we're bombarded with environmental toxins and all this other stuff in our everyday lives. So what we usually want to look at is bringing down estrogen. And most of us have to work on this. I literally have to work on this to this day. And because cervical fluid is made under the presence of estrogen, If we have more cervical fluid, that tells us we have more estrogen. Overproduction before ovulation looks like a lot of egg white fluid, days and days and days and days of it. So having 1 to 3 days of egg white is great. Having more than that or having like a ton of it can be a sign there's a lot of estrogen happening. If you're seeing ongoing cervical fluid after you've confirmed ovulation, which we're going to talk about confirming ovulation in just a little bit, if it doesn't dry up, that's also a sign of elevated estrogen dominating that luteal phase. So even if it's just ongoing wet and watery, we want that to dry up. We want it to come all the way back down to a dry or a sticky sensation. And as Audrey was talking about, I do talk a lot about histamine and estrogen. Histamine, the same thing that causes seasonal allergies, rashes, and allergic reactions, is influenced by estrogen. So the more estrogen we have, the more histamine we'll have. And conversely, the more histamine we have, the more estrogen we have. So they trigger each other. So folks who have allergy issues, so if you know anyone who takes daily like Claritin or Zyrtec, they probs have issues with estrogen excess because you can't have one without having the other. And so a lot of times when we see excess estrogen, we'll talk about lowering histamine as a way of bringing down estrogen with it. And there's a lot of other stuff that influences estrogen excess too. Everything from environmental toxins, estrogen mimicking chemicals that are in plastics, stress, like a whole bunch of stuff. So histamine is a huge one that flies under the radar. Cool. Any other questions for me? Okay.
Sorry, just
Yeah.
to repeat one sentence because that is super fascinating. Just because I've had like cyclical allergies and have never really been able to pinpoint it. So just to see that I have it. So estrogen excess, because estrogen triggers the production of histamine, you were saying, or
yes. Estrogen will trigger the production of histamine, and histamine will trigger the production of estrogen. So they fuel each other in this angry little cycle.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So one thing that's kind of cool, if you wanted to keep track of histamine along with your cycle, is that if you're cycle tracking and you know you're moving in towards your ovulation phase, so you're seeing cervical fluid being produced, notice if you see signs of histamine excess. So for me, what will often happen, actually happened in this cycle, I'll have no symptoms of histamine, nothing's going on, no sinus headaches, no rashes, nothing. And then just around ovulation for a day or two, I had a bunch of postnasal drip for no reason. And then it went away and I took nothing. And it went away because estrogen declined rapidly after I ovulated. And so that tells me that in this cycle, I'm struggling with some histamine influence. And it explains why I'm having a lot of breast tenderness right now. Because estrogen is high in this later phase of my cycle, probably because of all that stimulated histamine, or vice versa. One triggered the other. Cool. All right. Basal body temperature. This is the one, for some reason, everyone when we're cycle tracking wants to jump right to temperature. Fun fact, temperature is absolutely useless until you ovulate. So cervical fluid is the shining star from your period up to ovulation. And then temperature comes in handy to confirm that you ovulated and to tell us about progesterone and estrogen after ovulation, the health of that luteal phase. So your basal body temperature is your temperature first thing in the morning before getting out of bed, after at least 3 hours of uninterrupted rest. That's just like a big fancy way of saying take your temperature before you get out of bed and start your day. Because getting up and moving interrupts our temperature, it will start to increase it. So we want to get it at that baseline. Temperature is low before we ovulate, and it rises slightly after ovulation and will stay high until our next period begins. For taking temperature for cycle tracking, we want to use an oral thermometer. So not those new forehead ones that got really popular. You want to either use an oral thermometer, exactly like what she's holding up here. That's almost identical to what I use. Or the only other device that's been approved is that temp drop, this new armband. It goes around your arm, on your upper arm when you're sleeping, and it records your temperature automatically and it learns your own cycle. So it gets smarter and smarter as it goes. And that guy's expensive. It's like $150, but it's said to be extremely accurate. And it's great for folks who have different times that they wake up, because it can take your temperature even if you're sleeping late and have other influences under that. Awesome. Shocking number of people and thermometers on Canva right now. So I was able to come up with these great photos. So why does temperature shift? Temperature shifts as a result of the hormone progesterone. That's why temperature is useless in the beginning of our cycle, because we don't have any progesterone until we ovulate. So as progesterone rises following ovulation, it will cause a rise in your temperature. And just before your period begins, progesterone starts to dip back down, triggering the release of your uterine lining. And that triggers the return to those lower temps that we see in the beginning of the cycle. We call this biphasic. So your temperature will start down low, and then it will rise up, it will stay up, and it will come back down. So if you lined up all your temperature charts, it would look like this. So temperature does not tell us the exact moment ovulation has occurred. This is so friggin' important, because how many movies have we watched where some lady ran out of the bathroom and was like, I'm ovulating. Oh my God, we have to do it right now. That's not how getting pregnant works. Especially, and I literally just watched a show not too long ago where she said, my temperature is optimal. We have to try today. That's not how temperature works. Temperature doesn't tell you anything about ovulating. It tells you that you ovulated after it happened. It's a confirmation tool. The only thing that tells us about impending ovulation is cervical fluid or cervix tracking, which we'll get to in a second. So we use temperature to confirm that we had an ovulatory cycle. The all-time biggest question, what if I sleep in? So if you sleep in, temperatures will be higher than they would had you woken up at the normal time. There is a formula for this. If you wake up later, you can subtract 0.1 degree, or when you get your chart, it's 1 box for every half hour you overslept. So if I woke up at 8 o'clock and I usually wake up at 7 o'clock, that's 2 half hours. So I can move my temperature reading down 2 boxes. And it works in the reverse. If you woke up earlier than usual, you can add 1 box or 0.1 degree for each half hour that you woke up early. So don't worry, you don't have to wake up at the same exact time for the entire rest of your life if you choose to cycle track. And there are a few other things aside from sleeping in or waking up early that can disturb temperature, and they're kind of common, so it's important to know about. The first is getting sick. This one blows my mind. So I would only mildly had a stomach thing going on that Erin probably loved that I shared with her earlier today. I got some bad beans from a restaurant over the weekend, and it jacked up my digestion. And this morning I woke up and my temperature was so much higher than it usually is. And instead of freaking out, I knew that was my body fighting off what it was going on, this like illness that had taken over the last few days. So getting sick can raise our temperature, and we just take those as outliers. We won't use them in our temperature readings on our chart. Another thing that can disrupt it is travel, and that's simply because we're generally out of our routines. We're waking up earlier, we're sleeping in, we're in different time zones, so being mindful of that. Another common thing is drinking alcohol. This affects everyone differently. I will admit in my own cycle, it really doesn't have that much impact at all. And for other people, it does. So being mindful of how it impacts your own cycle. If you're having 1 drink, it's probably not going to do much. But if you're going out and you're having 3 or 4 drinks, it might cause an elevated temperature the next day, which you'll want to keep an eye on, because when any of these other disturbances happen, we can't adjust the temperature like we would for sleeping in or waking up earlier. We just write them off and we pretend that day didn't happen, and we use the other temperatures around it. Another thing is stress. I see this far less commonly, but for people who are hypersensitive, stress can play into temperature disturbances. And then certain medications, depending on how you respond, medication could mess things up. So if you're starting something new, just keeping an eye on it. And then the biggest one is a new thermometer. So every thermometer is a little bit different. So when you switch to a new one, you want to make a note of that on your cycle and be mindful that you're switching into this new rhythm of tracking with a new thermometer. Now, these things are all quite common, and it doesn't mean you can't cycle track if you get sick or you travel or you drink. I do literally all of these things. We just remain mindful of them, and we stay really on top of our charts to see if they're having an impact. And if they are, making choices about that around it, saying, well, I can't use this temperature because I know that I had a fever that day and I'm not going to be able to have this as an accurate reading. Cool. Another fun fact about medications, going back to histamine, if you take an antihistamine, it dries up your histamine and it can dry up your cervical fluid, because antihistamines are drying up mucus, and cervical fluid is essentially another type of mucus in the body. So if you're like, I'm not making a ton of cervical fluid and I don't know what's going on, and you take a daily antihistamine, that could be impacting it. Cool. Cervix position and texture. So the cervix is located at the back of your vagina. This is your vaginal canal. This is where your menstrual cup goes. This is where your tampon goes. This little guy is your cervix. It looks like an olive, right? With a little opening on it. And it's from this tiny little opening on the cervix that period blood, the lining of the uterus, which grows in here, comes out into the world. And it's where babies, which are growing in here, come out into the world. So the cervix is just the most amazing thing. And we're so blessed that we can literally reach up and touch it. But for some reason, we're never taught how to do that. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. Awesome. So what's the deal? I know, my cute little olive photo. This is so accurately what a cervix looks like that I can't even resist using these olives. It's so, people always say the tip of a nose. And then I saw a photo of the olive the other day and I was like, no, it's an olive. It's 1,000% an olive. So this is your cervix. So your cervix will be high. So higher up in your vagina, a little bit harder to reach, soft and open around the time of ovulation, because estrogen softens it. As you are further away from ovulation, so that is to say nearing your period or just coming off your period, it will be lower in the vagina. So boop, right there, easier to feel. It'll be firmer, feeling like one of these olives, and the opening will be closed, similar to this little opening on this olive. This is important because for folks who have heightened sensitivity, that is to say borderline discomfort with sex, sometimes if you're noticing it, but it's not every time, it can simply be related to being in your luteal phase when your cervix is lower and firmer. So it's more sensitive. It could possibly get hit during that time. So estrogen softens the cervix, progesterone will firm it up. And tracking the cervix, we don't really use it on its own. It's used as a confirmation tool to clarify what we're seeing with cervical fluid and temperature. And the cervix can be easily reached with your finger. Literally one clean finger. You can lube it up if you need to, sliding it inside like you would to search for a lost tampon or a menstrual cup that's a little stubborn. And you can slide it in like a scooping motion. I use my middle finger, but for the sake of the shape here, you come in, so you scoop down and then up, and it's right there. So it kind of comes in and down behind your pelvic bone, and your cervix should be up in the back. And it takes a few times to find it. And then we have additional fertility signs. one, you should not have to live like this. So this was just because I needed a photo, but if this is your life, message me. So one additional fertility sign is something called Mittelschmerz or ovulation pressure. One side or the other, you might feel pressure for a couple of moments, I should say, to 24 hours around ovulation. This can be from the swelling of that ovarian follicle or even the bursting of it out of the ovary. You might also notice breast or nipple sensation. This is due to estrogen. Around ovulation, you can feel an increased sensitivity in your nipples versus when we're nearing our period and we have that swollen sensation. And then ovulation spotting, which isn't something we often talk about, but it's spotting that happens for about 1 to 2 days and it's right around ovulation and it's super light and it only happens for that amount of time. If you're having spotting at any other time in your cycle, you want to chat with your doctor because spotting's not a common cycle. It's not a normal cycle thing to have happen. It is, however, more normalized and common to see with ovulation. And that's due to the sharp spike and then a rapid decline of estrogen. It's a response, a withdrawal bleed that can happen for a short period of time. Okay, questions about the 3 main tracking signs? No? All right. We're going to keep on rolling. I'm going to grab my phone for 1 second because I realize I don't have a clock around me and I just want to make sure I don't keep you for the whole rest of eternity. Okay, I lied. It was right behind me. Okay, confirming ovulation. To confirm ovulation, there are 2 rules we'll use. The first is peak plus 3. So we must record our cervical fluid peak day, which is that last day of egg white or most fertile type fluid, and then record 3 lesser fertile fluid days immediately following. So that often looks like an egg white day, and then the next day you'll see creamy or even sticky, and then dry. And you can confirm that you're coming down that buildup of cervical fluid. So your cervical fluid peak day is that last day of the most fertile type fluid. You won't know it's your last day until the next day when you don't have it anymore. So we want to isolate the peak day and then wait 3 days to ensure that cervical fluid is truly drying up. And then we want to apply the temperature 3/6 rule. So we must record a temperature reading that is higher than the 6 temperatures that came before it. So that is to say, if you woke up today and your temperature was at 98 and that was higher than the 6 previous days, then that would be your day of temperature rise. And you want to make sure you have 2 more temperature readings 2 days after today that are also at or above that mark, having your 3/6 rule. Ovulation, I'm going to go back. Ovulation oh Lord, I guess I'm not going back. There we go. Ovulation happens in between your cervical fluid peak day and the day of your temperature rise. So with cycle tracking, we cannot confirm the exact moment, the exact day ovulation happens. We can't pinpoint it exactly, but we can get within 24 to 48 hours by knowing when your cervical fluid peaked and when your temperature started to rise. So cervical fluid tells you that you're nearing ovulation and temperature tells you that ovulation has happened. So we get this window of time that we know ovulation happened within. Okay. Getting started with all this information on a chart. Before we dive into the specifics of using a chart, do you have questions on confirming ovulation? Has anyone been able to confirm ovulation in their cycles already? I know Erin has. Audrey, you have, right? She's getting it. Cool.
Could you go back to the temperature slide just one more time?
Yeah. This one?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around.
I know this is a little confusing. It'll
Order.
make sense when we see it on a chart.
Okay.
So 3/6, you want 3 high temperatures over top of 6 low ones. That's why we call it 3/6. But for the sake of using it to confirm ovulation, you don't even need all of that per se. We need to have a temperature that is higher than the 6 above it, and then 2 that follow. So there's those 2 high ones, the 6 low ones, and ovulation happens right in between the cervical fluid buildup and the temperature rise.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. Okay, charting. This is my real life chart from October, November of 2020. So getting started with your cycle chart. Some of you already have charts. If you don't, I'll be sending those to you tomorrow. At the top of your chart, you're going to write in the month, the year, and your age. So the month often looks like 1 month / the other because we don't perfectly have our cycles in just 1 month. And then you write in, you circle your intention to achieve pregnancy, to space, or to limit. The time of your temperature, so the time you intend on taking your temperature. And then the cycle length. You will fill this out at the end of your cycle. This is the number of days from the first day of your chart, from your first day of the period, to the day before your next period. So for example, a cycle length is from day 1 of your period all the way through your cycle. When your period starts, that is not the last day of your cycle. That's the first day of your next one. The last day of that cycle is the day before you started bleeding. Common misconception. From there, on the side of your chart, you'll see chart number. This is which number chart it is. For those who are just starting out, this will be chart number 1. Was there a temperature rise in your last cycle? If this is your first chart, NA. If this is chart number 1 through whatever, then you'll have that information. This just lets us know, was your last chart a cycle where you ovulated? Because if you didn't ovulate, then this chart is actually the extension of your last one, because a new cycle didn't start, you just ran out of space and you need a new page. The shortest cycle in the last year, you want to keep track of that. The longest cycle, that tells us about the health of your cycle. And then this shortest cycle rule is for the birth control method, so ignore that. That's a little confusing. Temperatures. This is what it will look like on your temperature chart. You will record a dot in the square that corresponds with the temperature readings on the left side. And then you will link them together like a line graph. The day of your cycle is here at the bottom. So if this is the first day of your period, this is day 1, 97.2, you fill it in there. If you have temperature disturbances, you drank alcohol, you woke up late, you were sick, there's a code right here, and you can fill in that code in the code of disturbances. And if it's anything other than sleeping in late or waking up early, you circle it and you disregard it. If it's one of those ones where you slept in or woke up early, you fill in the original temp and then you draw a dotted line down to where it would be once you adjust it, and you connect it through the adjusted one. Going back to Phoebe's question where she was talking about the 3/6 rule, here's where we'll talk about it. So in this chart, the 3/6 rule starts here on day 13. That's the first day of temperature rise, even though it looks kind of like all the other ones before it. Here's how I know. If I count back 6 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it is 1 box higher than all those 6. That tells me it's probably the day of temperature rise. I have to wait 2 days to confirm, and then I see boop, boop, it climbs up from there. So these are the 3 highs. These are the 6 lows, and we can know ovulation happened somewhere in this day 11, 12 range. Cool. Up next, we have cervical fluid. Summary of cervical fluid, it'll grow from the bottom. So the bottom is moist, creamy, or any fluid seen. You fill in the full box, and you fill in all the boxes for all the types of fluid seen. So if you see a wet and stretchy, you'll fill in the bottom box and the second box, because this is telling us that you're growing in fertile fluid. Even if you didn't have creamy that day, we want to fill them all in to show that you're increasing in fertile fluid. This wet line, even if you're just having wet and watery, you want to fill this in. It doesn't have to also be stretchy. Those are both nice fertile types of fluid, so we want to see that filled in. And you'll see cervical fluid builds up after the period, builds up over time. You might have a few egg white days, and your peak day is this last egg white day. But you won't know that until the next day when cervical fluid dropped off. And then you'll see here, you can have some appearance of that sticky fluid later in the cycle before the period begins. You fill in your period with a red dot or a circle in the period and spotting line. And then vaginal sensation, which doesn't have an arrow here, you can write in D, M, or W in each cycle day box to note the sensation you feel as you walk around. Then we have the appearance of cervical fluid. This line is small, so if you want to create a little code, you're more than welcome to, but this is where you would write what you see. So streaked with red, stretched 1 inch, kind of tacky. You can fill that all in there. And then you circle your peak day, the last day of the most fertile type fluid, and you fill in the amount of fluid, 1 to 3, 1 being the smallest amount of fluid and 3 being the largest. So probably in this cycle, days 6, 7, 8 would be a 1, 10 and 11 would be a 2, and then 12 through 14 would be a 3, if I had to guess. Cool. And then we come to the bottom, cervix, which is totally optional. You don't have to track it if you choose to. In the top line, you write an F or an S for firm or soft. And then below it, high or low, closed or open. You can do HL, CO, use the first letters as code, or super fun. The way we learn this in school is you imagine this rectangle is literally your vaginal canal, and you draw the cervix in how and where you feel it. So if it was high and open, you would draw a circle, open circle, high up in that box. If it was low and closed, you would draw a closed circle, lower in the box. If it was somewhere in the middle, you would draw that in. And then below that, we have ovulation pain. So you can put LS or RS for left side or right side in the box that corresponds with the day of the cycle that you feel that pressure. And for breast changes, you can mark those in as well. I just do a little check mark, but you're welcome to put in a code for T for tenderness, S for swelling, P for pain, whatever resonates with you. Fertile days, this is something that we use for the birth control method for pregnancy achievement. You don't have to mind yourself with that right now, but know that there are more fertile days in your cycle than just the cervical fluid present days, most likely, even in my own cycle. So when we create that window around it, there's more rules we use to really hone in on that fertile window. So don't feel like that this one is applying to you at the moment. And then a fun one to keep track of, I say fun, probably in COVID times it's depressing, but is intercourse. So when you have sex, you can put a little check mark in the boxes. I like to write down the birth control method I use. So for me, it's either condoms or withdrawal method. Kind of fun to write down, even if you just had an orgasm, you can keep track of those too in those boxes. And then you can see where it lined up with the days of your cycle. Beauteous. Any questions on the charts? Totally feel free to make me go back. I know it's a lot of information. Everyone feeling it? Did it make those things make sense? Where to fill everything out? Okay. So now we're going to talk for a second about using cycle tracking as natural birth control. I'm really proud of having found this photo, just so we're clear. So the window for conception in each cycle is up to 6 days. This is based on the lifespan of sperm and egg. By avoiding unprotected intercourse on these crucial days, you can prevent pregnancy naturally. That's how I've been doing it for over 7 years now. Some important info. The egg, once released during ovulation, is alive for about 24 hours. That is to say, you walking around on your own are fertile, if you will, for 24 hours a cycle. It's sperm that mucks things up. So sperm can live in our bodies in that optimal cervical fluid, in that creamy, stretchy, and egg white fluid for up to 5 days. So when we're getting pregnant, when people get pregnant, it's happening from sex most often that occurred before we ovulated, because the sperm is hanging out there waiting for ovulation to happen so it can pounce. So the sympto-thermal method works as birth control by isolating these days, the days before ovulation and the days after, so that we know we have encompassed, quote unquote, that conception window. With the natural birth control method, we expand it. It's not just 6 days. We add a buffer zone on either side at the beginning and at the end to create what we call a fertile window. And we avoid having unprotected sex during that time, including the buffer zone, to make sure we're taking the necessary precautions and we're not simply trying to isolate 6 days, which is impossible because we can't know the exact moment ovulation has happened. So using the method as birth control. Right now, what you've learned so far in this workshop is how to use the sympto-thermal method as cycle tracking, to track your cycle, to understand if you're ovulating, to get a representation of what your hormones are doing, and to really start to assess the health of your cycle and where and if your cycle might need support. To use the sympto-thermal method as birth control, we have to apply 4 rules. There are 4 rules to the method, and we have to know how to apply them to our unique cycles and understand how to adjust them for various cycle scenarios. Now, the sympto-thermal method of birth control gets a bad rap. So in scientific studies, it has been studied to be up to 99.5% effective when used perfectly and learned from a trained instructor like myself. The variance with the method is that there's a lot of human influence on it. So folks who aren't learning from an instructor, they're self-teaching, there's a lot more room for error. Folks who are not abiding by the rules, which happens more often than you think because they're in the heat of the moment, this leads to skewing some of the numbers. But when used appropriately, this method is literally just as effective as taking the pill, which blows my mind that it's not more talked about. So now we're at the part where I know some folks are here for lots of different reasons. At this moment in time, I am working with the Natural Birth Control Academy that I have going on. So I do want to offer up some info about that if people are interested. Know that if you're in the game of pregnancy achievement or you're in the game of hormone balancing, I feel you. And spoiler alert, I've got stuff coming for you too. It's just not ready yet. So I will be reaching out when that happens as well. Right now, I have the Natural Birth Control Academy open as an option for folks who are looking to dive into using the sympto-thermal method as their form of natural birth control. It is a 12-week group course where I walk you step by step through the method. It starts on March 11th, which means that by June 1st, we literally wrap up on May 27. You will have everything you need to use cycle tracking as birth control 100% on your own. I'm going to send you these slides. That's why there's an annoying click link. You can click that at your own time. It will take you to the website where you can learn more. I'm not going to rattle off everything to you right here. But literally in 12 weeks and 3 months, you get absolutely everything you need, all the information to use the method 100% on your own. And okay, that's my liability waiver. You don't need to see that. You've all already signed that because you're members. So with the group, we will dive in even deeper to what you learned today. What we do is look at the cervical fluid, the temperature, the cervix, and we apply all the rules to use those as birth control. You get a ton of practice charts. So you're not just practicing with your own cycle, you're practicing with a lot of sample clients as well. You're interacting with the group, and you also get one-on-one sessions with me to apply everything you learn directly to your unique cycle. We look at how to spot hormonal imbalances. you will be so much further ahead than other folks in the course because you're already going to start cycle tracking after this workshop. So we will have information to be able to look at and see if there are cycle imbalances and be able to work with that. And we'll also look at things like how to talk to your providers about this, because doctors are real natural birth control haters. And we need to be able to talk to them in a really empowered way so we can advocate for ourselves and our choices. And then we look at living in alignment with the seasons of our cycle, using our cycle as a way to live in alignment with our bodies and to honor our own natural rhythms. So we're not pushing against them, we're not suppressing them like we would have if we were on hormonal birth control or not in tune with our cycle. So we do a lot of work in this course. The main overarching thing is making sure everyone is confident to use this method on their own as birth control by the time we wrap up. So that's what I have going on for you. We have a little fun, I mean, not to put you on the spot, but Erin just wrapped up her natural birth control work with me a week ago. She went through the 12-week system and learned this. Do you want to share anything, Erin, about your experience?
Sure. So I just came off the IUD. So I was just coming off hormonal birth control and just wanted to learn natural birth control. So working with Brandy was really great. We did a more like one-on-one style, so I didn't do like the group thing, but it was super awesome. I learned so much and she made it really easy. I mean, now it's like takes me no time to do throughout the day and it's so simple. So I would highly recommend.
Thanks, Erin. I love it. Yes. And Erin came right off of the IUD. She was just a few cycles off of it. So anyone who's newly off of birth control know that it doesn't have to be this big, hard feat. I know people love to scare us about needing time to regulate and all this stuff. There's a lot we can do. And as Erin said, it's literally so easy to learn once you know what to look for and you know the rules to apply. And folks are always amazed that in literally just the 3 months, in the 3 cycles, we go from feeling so nervous about the method to like 100%, I'm so confident in this. It's like this huge shift that happens. So if you're interested, I would absolutely love to chat. We're all in the Facebook group. I just put out a message the other day. I'm doing a few free calls. Here, I'll stop the share so you can see my face. I'm doing a few free calls next week and the week after. So if anyone is interested and you want to chat more about what the Natural Birth Control Academy is like, and if it's a good fit, I'm absolutely happy to chat with you. I would love to meet with you and walk you kind of through that process. So feel free to message in Facebook, hey, Brandy, I want one of those, or you can message me on Instagram. I would absolutely love to have you. And as Erin said, she got me one-on-one, which is fun, but in the group we'll have more energy, more buzz happening. And it's literally one of my favorite things that I do in the whole world. So if you want to be in on my favorite thing in the whole world, then don't tell my fiance that. No, he is my favorite thing, but this is a very close one in line. Cool. So that's all I have for you. I will send you the recording. I know we went through a lot tonight. You don't have to memorize it all. You will have it at your disposal to move through at your own pace. You'll have me in the Facebook group to ask any questions. And as you start cycle tracking and you start getting information about your cycle, feel free, book an office hours call. We can go in, a few of you have done that already, and we'll just look at your charts. We'll sift through it. We'll find your ovulation. We'll find if there's any imbalances underlying and point you in the right direction for any support you might be needing. So use me as a resource as you start this cycle tracking work. Cool. So as we wrap up, I would love to open it up to you and to hear, we don't have too many people on the call and we have a few minutes left. I'd love to hear one thing from everyone that really resonated with you or that you were super surprised by as we were going through our workshop tonight. Does anyone want to start? Everyone's like, we're on the spot.
I guess for me, I love looking at the different phases of the cycle in terms of the seasons. I feel like that's a really easy way for me to connect to the vibe of that phase.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite phase, a favorite vibe?
Probably the spring follicular,
Yeah.
feeling all the energy.
Yes, I feel that. Awesome. Kristen says, yeah, the phases of the menstrual cycle and their vibe. So fun to look at that, especially given that we've never been taught to look at our life that way. And when we really start to harness it, so much starts to open up for us. And imagine if we were doing that in, like, we were taught how to do that in high school, how different would our lives have been up until now? I can't help but wonder. Hillary.
I'm really surprised to hear how easy the tracking is based on looking at how complicated that chart looks.
I know the number one thing everyone says when they see a chart, and I'm sure Erin said it too in the beginning, is like, holy crap, that looks so confusing. And there's a lot of info we put on the chart, but really it's just because we're looking at like 30 days at a time. So it tries to crunch in 30 days of info. But, and I can let Erin speak to this a little bit too. On any given day, all I'm doing is putting a dot in a box, drawing part of a line, filling in a few boxes for cervical fluid, and then making like 1 or 2 notes. Erin, would you say you do much more than that?
No, not much at all. And like, I don't know if this is helpful, but like, so this is my chart from last month, and like, yeah, it looks crazy. But like, so I just started a new chart, and it's like, oh yeah, only a
Yeah.
tiny little bit. So like, you're only really doing one line at a day.
That's
And
actually such a good point, Erin. You never look at a whole busy filled out chart until you're at the end of your cycle. So you're just going one little strip down. You're just going one column at a time for each day. That's a great point. Trisha said, I loved learning about the vibes in each cycle. I know you've been posting about how to honor your cycle, and I was excited to learn. I wish I had someone like you to teach me when I was 16 starting hormonal birth control. I know, I wish I had me too back then. But back then I didn't know what I know now. I know this should be taught when we're younger, and I will fight tooth and nail to get this in schools. But right now, I'm not super loved by the young schooling community or the health providers. But we will get there, one cycle tracking babe at a time. Cool. Anything else? Phoebe, was this helpful for confirming ovulation?
Yeah, I was actually just gonna pop in and I like had my video off and then turned it on and forgot that I was wearing these like ridiculous headphones.
No, I love
it. So that's fun. But yeah, no, it was helpful, and I'm excited to go back and figure out the temperature situation. And I guess I'm still feeling hesitant about finding cervical position. I don't know if anybody else like really struggles with that. I like the olive symbology. That was nice. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Is checking it in like a bearing down fashion is what they call it. So like how you would be if you were inserting or removing a menstrual cup almost. So like taking a little bit of a squatting stance. Checking in the shower with one leg up is super helpful. Something else that I really like, and it is helpful for some folks in the beginning, is having your partner help you. So this is kind of like, we don't think about this often, but our partners sometimes have more experience with feeling our cervix than we do because we don't put parts of our body into our vagina, but they do. So we can ask them what they've ever felt, if what they've noticed, and kind of if you're comfortable, you can explore that together as well. So that's also an option that I know some people have liked. And I think the olive metaphor is helpful. The tip of the nose thing is not as helpful.
I also think something that I experienced was when I was checking it every day, it felt like overwhelming and I wasn't feeling it change at all. But then I started doing it like every other day or every other couple days, and I could start noticing a more dramatic change. So I don't know if that would help.
Yeah, that's actually super helpful to mention, is that tracking every day is only super useful when you know what you're looking for. Before you know what to look for, you almost want to check at crucial times so you can tell the radical difference, the big shifts. So you want to check like a day or two after your period ends. And then you want to check when you're having egg white cervical fluid. And then you want to check like a day or two before your period starts again. And that will show you the biggest shifts. And once you get a feel for what your firm is and what your soft is, you can start to notice the daily shifts. That's a really good piece of advice. See, I do this so often that sometimes I need other people to remind me. Cool. Brianna or Audrey, is there anything you want to share before we sign off? And you're welcome to pass. I'm just painfully outgoing.
No, that's okay. I'll share something. I came in super late. But I didn't know about the adjusting the temperature for the half-hour difference, which explains a lot for me in my cycle tracking that I've been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
So that was super helpful for me.
Good. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't figure out how to work my camera either. Otherwise, I would be on. But I think my husband did something, and I can't figure out how to get that on. But
That's okay.
But yeah, I think that'll probably make a big difference for me in terms of like just a little bit more consistency.
Yeah, and even more clarity. It makes the temperature readings easier to notice on your chart, and is a great reminder that we're using this for most of us as hopefully for the rest of our lifetime to understand our body and our cycles. And we can't expect ourselves to have these rigid routines where we wake up at the same time every day for the next 20, 30, however many more years. And so we have to have some mechanism to take that into consideration.
Right.
Awesome. Well, it has been, Audrey, did I cut you off? Did you say pass? Okay. Okay, I thought so. Though fun thing, have I shouted out Audrey yet in our group? She makes the most amazing jewelry items, beaded earrings. Do you have any that you want to show us? You want to show us some? If you take your mic off, yeah, we can see you big.
Yeah, I wear these almost every single day. They're Aura Quartz, black faceted tourmaline, and then like a polished tourmaline. I also do like, I hang them on my lamp because I'm fancy like that.
I love that.
I do beadwork like that, like little fringes, like fun, and
Those are
I do
amazing.
short ones, long ones. I do customs, so.
She has big ones that go to like your shoulders. They're
like
such a vibe.
they're really fun.
Awesome. So Audrey is Sobo Studio. You should share in our Facebook group, share us your website or a little link to something, your Instagram.
Thank you.
Yeah. And anyone is welcome to do that. We're allowed to know each other as like real life humans who do other stuff than have periods. I know Erin's got some work going. Some other folks in here might as well. So feel free to share. Cool. Thanks, Audrey. So that is all I have for you. I'm so excited to be able to empower you with this wisdom, with this knowledge. Like I said, if you have any questions, I'm here for you always. Set up those office hour sessions, access me. Also, feel free to go into our Facebook community and let me know any other topics you would love for these workshops. We have another one coming up in March, which is magically just a few weeks away now. So if there's anything you're really excited to learn about or to learn more about, like the seasons of the cycle, that can be like a whole workshop for us. We can dive into it. So let me know what you're craving, and I'm happy to create some custom content for our workshops as well. Otherwise, I love you all. I say this a lot. Audrey's heard me say this before, but I'm going to get emotional. But by you all attending these workshops and being members, I know you feel supported by me, but the wholehearted truth is that I feel immensely supported by you. This is a long time dream come true for me to be able to do this work and to serve all of you so deeply. And quite like I say at the end of my yoga classes, I say at the end of my workshops, a wholehearted, genuine thank you to you for showing up and letting me do this thing that I love so much, because without you, I couldn't do this. So I love you. Thank you. I hope you have the most amazing Wednesday evening, and I will see you all in our Facebook community. Until the next time, friends. Bye.
Thanks, Brandy.